LOL take two. LOL take two. LOL take two. Now listen. Information is everywhere. You can be watching the news on TV and there are stock prices running along the bottom of your screen as well as headlines popping up, and you're expected to read all of them at the same time. It's like an information daisy chain. My new phone alerts me that I have arrived home. Really? I hadn't realized that. When I go for my yearly hearing exam and they plug in my devices, they tell me what percentage of the time I was in loud noises, what percentage music, what percentage talking. Oh my God, stop. You are freaking me out. We have more information than we know what to do with, and I would tend to argue that we are no better off than we were when we had to work for our information. Back in the day, we had these things called World Book encyclopedias to look up information. They were beautifully bound books that, if you had them growing up in suburban Iowa, that meant you had some extra money to afford them. You got bonus status points for the accompanying Childcraft series. The poorer people had the Funkin' Wagnalls encyclopedias you got one at a time when you bought groceries at Hy-Vee, and sadly, they rarely had a full set. I loved the World Book encyclopedias. I could sit for hours looking through them and something would pique my curiosity and I would dive in and learn all about something new. We used to have to look up phone numbers and phone books, which were hundreds of pages of teeny tiny print, basically printed on toilet paper. My friend Scott was a master at being able to find phone numbers quickly and would actually have me time him to see how fast he could find a number. We challenged each other sometimes to see who could look up numbers faster, and Scott always won. This is what kids who didn't play sports did. All this information and technology has taken the fun out of doing all the naughty things we did as kids. I mean, for God's sake, you can't even have a good night of ding-dong ditch anymore. That's where you ring somebody's doorbell and then run. Everybody has security cameras, which sends video to their phone when somebody rings the doorbell. Caller ID has rid the world of good old crank phone calling. My little brother Tim and I were masters. In fact, we even audio taped our crank calls. One time we found somebody selling an Afghan puppy in the want ads and called them. A nice lady answered and we asked, "How big is your Afghan?" "Well, it's normal size for its age, about 10 pounds. "Would it fit on my bed?" "Well, sure, it's small." "But I have a big bed. Would it be a big enough Afghan?" She reached her frustration point. "It's an Afghan hound, you idiot. Who is this?" Then we started laughing and hung up on the poor woman. I tell you, it was just good, clean, wholesome fun. My best friend Tony and I had seen this movie of the week starring Kate Jackson about a ghost that haunts a Beverly Hills mansion. The ghost turned out to be a lady covered in billowing shears who ran around the mansion grounds at night, scaring the inhabitants. We decided to haunt the streets of our suburb, Urbandale, in a similar manner. One summer night, we built a fort outside in my backyard. Now, I use the term fort loosely, as we basically just covered my backyard swing set with blankets, lit the inside with colored lighting from our garage theater company, brought out our sleeping bags, and stayed up until all hours. We then took turns covering ourselves with one of my mom's old curtain shears and running under streetlights when cars were about a half block away. We thought it was scary. They would usually slow down, unsure of what they had seen, but ultimately, nobody really seemed to care. When we were bored haunting 72nd Street, we headed back to my backyard and saw our fort from a distance. It was lit up so brightly from the inside, it looked like a gigantic UFO had landed in my backyard. We retired to our UFO and went to sleep. At the crack of dawn, the summer sun was coming up, and we awoke to find that all the blankets covering the swing set had blown off in the night. It was just us laying in our sleeping bags in the backyard. It was too early to go inside, and we wanted to go back to sleep, so we started hanging the blankets back up on the swing set and singing as Cher. "I've got a gall-darn freaky on shipping my sink, and I don't know what the hell to do." Since this podcast has a clean rating, all those pretend swear words I just used weren't pretend when we were singing them at the top of our lungs at 4 a.m, and the "shipping my sink" ended with the letter T. We thought it was hilarious and kept repeating it, even louder. Oh, honey, I got a gall-darn friggin' ship in my sink, and I don't know what the hell to do. Cher was doing a full-on profanity concert, and finally our neighbor behind us, Judy, screamed out her window, "Tony and Tony, shut up!" Needless to say, that put an end to that. I had awful hay fever allergies during the Iowa summers. The minute I could drive, my dad gave me the wretched chore of loading up the lawnmower in our trunk and driving halfway across town to mow the grass at a duplex my folks had purchased as rental property. They had a steady stream of tenants on one side of the duplex, but my dad rented the other half to a couple of nuns at a great discount, much to my mother's dismay. Dad told me I had to bag all the grass clippings instead of letting them just stay on the grass. This made the job take twice as long, plus handling all the grass irritated my hay fever to the point of sneezing nonstop and a snot fountain pouring out of my nose. It was the most miserable 2 hours ever. The couple of times I chose not to bag the clippings, damn Sister John and Sister Jude called up my dad and snitched on me. And did they ever offer me so much as a glass of water or even a Kleenex when I was out slaving on their lawn? No, sure didn't. And I don't think Jesus would have liked that. I went to the local chain pharmacy, Drugtown, to try and find some better hay fever medicine. There was an attractive pharmacist named Randy working there, whom I suspected was gay. He advised me on the best medicine to take and was really helpful, but most of all, I was fascinated by him. He seemed like a normal guy. He had a good job, and he was like me. Growing up in a homogenized white suburb had its perks, but it also had its drawbacks, especially if you were different. I mean, we only had one black guy in our entire graduating class of 350. I can only imagine how he felt. He didn't have the veil of heterosexuality to hide behind. We got a bunch of Vietnamese refugees in our school who must have thought, "Oh my God, where have I been dropped?" One time, Tony and I snuck into the Al Pacino movie Cruising about a sleazy gay guy in New York who ends up getting butchered in the end. We were horrified. We didn't know anybody else like us in Urbandale, and we were petrified that we were destined to end up like Al Pacino in the movie. Thankfully, we met each other in the 4th grade, became the best of friends, and got each other through a lot of tough years. And discovering Randy, the pharmacist, a grown-up version of us living a good life, became our passion. Kind of like being fascinated with a rare animal in the zoo. So, Tony and I began stalking him. We found out where Randy lived, not an easy chore in those days. He lived in an apartment complex on the way to West Des Moines, and since I was now able to use my folks' car, we made frequent trips to his apartment, with binoculars, of course. And he was just a normal guy. He ate dinner, he watched TV, he had a boyfriend over, and they had cocktails in his living room. Nothing tawdry, certainly nothing scary like in that Al Pacino movie or how we were taught those kinds of people lived. We were at his apartment one afternoon, and he almost saw us. Thankfully, he didn't, but we realized we needed to be more careful. The next time we went during the daylight, we wore wigs from our garage theater company and big, dark Jackie O sunglasses. As it happened, we were at a stop sign, and suddenly there was Randy and his boyfriend walking right in front of our car, going to the tennis courts across the street. I can only imagine what he thought when he glanced into our car. Who the hell are these two drag queens sitting in the Chevy Vega? Eventually, Randy left Drugtown and moved away. I never knew what happened to him. I've tried Googling him and could never track him down. You know, I have been with Bill for 32 years, and I feel it's important to let young people know that we're married, that we have created a good life for ourselves. As a gay kid, it is lonely and difficult when you're growing up, but honest to God, it can get better. Suicide rates are still high for gay kids, and people still push their narrow world views on them. In many ways, we have come a long way, but like those Vietnamese refugees who landed in Iowa in the 70s, a lot depends on where you're dropped. Randy might have figured out that the two guys wearing the pharaoh wigs in the car were us, but he let us watch him living his life that he had created, and I was always grateful for that. It's so funny, I have gone through my yearbook as an adult, and oh my God, on almost every page there is a gay or lesbian kid. What was in the water in Urbandale? Just saying. But sadly, none of us knew the others existed at the time except Tony and me. How much angst could we all have saved ourselves if we had just been ourselves back then and realized that we seemingly rare animals of Urbandale weren't so rare after all? Think of the brunches we could have had. A few months ago, my work wife, Jackie, told me about a community college instructor her daughter had and how she thought he was adorable. She told me his name, and within about 5 minutes, I had found out where he lived, had his phone number, had a Google Earth photo of his condo building, knew what he paid for his condo and what his taxes were, and what permits he had pulled for his bathroom remodel, and had a photo of him on vacation in Mexico with his boyfriend. This was all without leaving my desk or putting on a pharaoh wig. I sent the information to Jackie and she said, "Wow, you're good." I said, "Oh, honey, please. That was a piece of cake. Just call me Google Boy because, well, let's face it, I still got it." LOL take two. LOL take two. LOL take two.